Okay, so riddle me this. If you're an entity that processes W-4s and you have a 60-day process that has to take place regardless of any other situation, then why do you tell your customer that if they file their W-4 by a certain date, that they will be able to keep their exempt status that they had for the previous year? Why do you tell them that if it doesn't matter? Because it literally does not. It does not matter when you file prior to that given date. You could wait until the third or fourth or the first business day of 2026. You could submit these documents, and it's still going to take 60 days anyway. Okay, so why? Why do you tell people that when ultimately it doesn't matter? Because you still have a 60-day process for this particular document. I literally don't understand some of the processes that some of these entities that we have to deal with in life have. It just doesn't make sense. 60 days? For juxtaposition purposes here, my job after filing a W-4, putting my retirement income on there as additional income I wanted for consideration for withholding, and my job informed me literally the next day that by the next pay period, the W-4 will be processed and the deductions would start coming out, starting with the next paycheck. Now that is efficiency. But as it is becoming painfully obvious to me that not every entity is considered, is really concerned, I should say, with efficiency. They're not. They're not efficient at all. They're very inefficient. And it's really an irritation for something to be so inefficient. And I'm just making this video because, maybe I'm not the only person out there being frustrated by this process. That's the reason why this video is being made. So just to give proper context here, I'm going to tell a small story. So when I was retiring from the military, of course, I had to do a W-4 because I was expecting to get retirement checks from the entity that pays them. So, filled out the W-4. I started getting my retirement checks. There was clearly federal withholding coming out. Okay. Well, then the end of the year comes along. And so the end of the year comes along, and when I start to do my taxes, I come to find out I owed Uncle Sam all kind of money. And I'm like, how? I don't get this. Why do I owe Uncle Sam so much money? Well, after some inquiries, I determined that my job W-4, which was always, immediately recognized by the IRS, no problem. This is what he got during the year. This is what his tax liability is. Well, then, all of a sudden, here comes this retirement W-4. Oh, he's been getting retirement money all year too, on top of the job. So we have to completely recalculate his tax liability. And instead of him owing very little or close to nothing at all, he owes all this extra money because the federal withholding that was coming out of his retirement check wasn't enough. There was not enough being withheld throughout the year. So, as a consequence of that, I ended up owing the IRS money. Of course, I, took care of and paid. But I was just like, why do I owe them this money? Why? What is the deal? Then I was advised by my son to take my retirement income for the year and add that to an updated W-4 that I would give my job for processing. So not only do they take my job paychecks, they also consider my retirement check all at the same time. Everything is taken care of at once, each month, throughout the year. In theory, at the end of the year, I should either owe zero, owe very, very little, or maybe get a slight refund, a tiny refund. So, that is more acceptable to me. And I did that. And it has worked well since that point. Last year, filed W-4 exempt on my 2025 W-4 for my retirement check, because again, all that money was already accounted for in my work W-4. Took them a little time, it got done, yada, yada, yada. This year comes along. I get told via email, hey, if you need to file, if you're claiming exempt again, you need to file an updated W-4 for 2026 by February the 17th. Well, on February the 5th, I filed said W-4. When my March paycheck from my retirement came in, there was deductions taken out. Why? Well, then I call the appropriate entity and I made an inquiry as to why I'm getting this money taken out when my entire goal was to file exempt and stay exempt for the year, since I had already done the other transaction with my job. I was informed that it was a 60-day process to process said W-4. 60 days. Oh. So in the interim, I'm going to have federal withholding that I didn't want to have. And she says, unfortunately, yes. I said, so there's nothing I can do about this? And she said, well, you can consult with your tax advisor. Wow. That, I don't know what to say about that response. I can't say it was the most enlightened I've ever been. See your tax advisor? Well, my translation to that was, well, I guess I'm just going to have to file for a refund at the end of the tax year. Because I'm pretty certain, I consider myself fairly intelligent. I'm pretty sure that the tax advisor, whoever I'd call, would basically tell me the same thing. Well, you're going to have to file for a refund at the end of the year. Really not much else you can do. Complete the year, file for the refund. That's it. But again, I go back to, if you have a 60-day process, and it's a 60-day process, no matter whatever else happens, no matter what other suspense dates you give people, no matter what other information is put out, it's going to be 60 days. So then why put out a suspense date? What was the purpose for that? I don't get it. Because my entire goal was to not have anything taken out the entire year. Because I'd already handled that, as previously explained. So, what are we doing? This particular entity and others needs to take a serious review on how they do things and how they conduct these processes. They call us customers. I can tell you I definitely do not feel like a customer. Because my traditional definition of a customer is somebody that pays and patronizes a product, and with most businesses, at least anyway, without the customer, you don't have a business. So I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. Maybe they could delegate this down to state level and have a bunch of state, subordinate elements doing the same function and the same job for a smaller population. Perhaps more manageable for them to do that than to have one centralized entity trying to do it for everybody. I'm just saying. Because from my experience, it ain't working. They need to take a look at that. But it's just frustrating. It's frustrating. I'm trying to have a tax year in which I have either very, very little of a refund, or if I end up having to owe very, very little that I owe, or a big fat zero. Zero would obviously be optimal, but the other two would be just as acceptable, or nearly as acceptable. What I don't want is a huge refund, and I definitely don't want to owe the IRS a bunch of money. So, that's where it's at. Just figured I'd do this video just in case there are other people out there just as frustrated with certain processes that I am. So, that's pretty much it. I'm going to sign off here, and peace to all.